Alright guys, welcome back to another episode of the Advanced Training Tutorial Series for the MD-11 by TFDi for Microsoft Flight Simulator. I am your host, Mustafa. You can find me streaming over on Twitch at twitch.tv/Mustafa. I usually stream about 3 times a week, mostly Flight Simulator content, but occasionally some other things like Truck Simulator or Railroads Online. If you have any questions or comments about this series, please do leave a comment below. I do try to check all those comments and respond to them as best I can. However, if you really want quicker responses and responses from a lot more intelligent people even than me, sometimes you can join our Discord, which the link is in the description below there. And then finally, if you don't mind, please leave a like and hit the subscribe button on this channel if you're finding this content helpful. I really hope it is helping you guys. I'm getting a lot of good feedback on this and the Mad Dog Masterclass series, so I appreciate that. All right, let's dive right in. Today's, this is a little bit further from when I recorded the other stuff. I wanted to get everything kind of sorted here. But we're talking about SPAD. And if you don't know what SPAD is, it's actually SPAD.next. And it's a program that allows you to map all of your controls in Flight Simulator outside of the main Microsoft controls menu. The Microsoft has a very robust set of controls that you can map. However, even that is very limiting in some of the ways you can do it, and so you can only go so far with Microsoft. It's great if you don't want to spend the money, you don't have to do that. But if you don't have SPAD or you're not getting SPAD, basically you need to ignore this video. This is not for you. Unless you want to kind of see what the capabilities of SPAD are, allow us to do, and it may convince you that, hey, it's worth getting. SPAD works throughout Flight Simulator with pretty much every aircraft out there. It's especially helpful for third-party advanced add-on aircraft that give you a lot of controls through LVARs and events and all kinds of things that you can map that you normally can't do in just the vanilla Microsoft Flight Simulator controls setup menu. Okay, so that's what we're looking at today. This is what SPAD.next looks like, and I'm just going to refer to it as SPAD. SPAD.next. You can find it, just Google SPAD.next, and you can find it. It is a paid software. It can be a little pricey, especially if you want the, and I do kind of recommend getting the full, not the full version, but the version for Flight Simulator, but the one that gives you the unlimited, the lifetime support. Because what's going to happen is you will get a limited amount of updates with the default, and then you won't get any more updates unless you pay for that lifetime support. And certain things with Microsoft, certain updates will break SPAD at a certain point. In fact, I had that happen to me about 6 months ago, and because I didn't think I needed the lifetime support, and I was like, it's fine, it's all working. And then when that broke, I wasn't getting updates anymore, and I had to, so I was like, oh, okay, well, so, but you pay for that, an additional amount, but it's a lifetime of support. You don't have to pay per month, and it's all, so it feels expensive up front, but it's worth it. So anyway, just to get that out of the way and explain what that is, you are going to probably want that if you're going to use SPAD in the long term. All right, now that that's out of the way, let's take a look. This is not a SPAD tutorial per se, but it is going to give you a good understanding of how to use SPAD specifically with the MD-11 and with the equipment that I'm using. Now, if you're not using the same equipment, the same principles will apply to your equipment for the most part, but you can use this to kind of try and adapt and understand how best to use SPAD with your equipment. So just to give you a full disclosure of what I'm using the Bravo throttle quadrant from Honeycomb for my throttles and some autopilot configuration stuff. I'm using a T16000M Thrustmaster joystick for a tiller. That's really it. So we're not really going to mess with this on SPAD because I'm not using this for anything that is specific to the MD-11. This is specifically for a tiller, and right now Microsoft has not opened up the tiller API, whatever reason. So SPAD doesn't have access to it. So basically it's not really doing anything. The only thing I have mapped in here is some controls for cameras, so that way when my hand's on the tiller instead of my yoke, I can kind of select back to a home button and use the POV. But all the camera controls in Microsoft Flight Simulator are also under lock and key, and so you can't use SPAD to control those either. So while the thing is on here and you can see it moving axes around and the tiller through the little gap there, if you click on here, you'll see that none of these buttons are mapped because I can't use them to do camera views and controls. So there are a couple aircraft, not this one, that I've used some of these buttons because there's just a bunch of buttons over here that I have access to map things like doors and, well, really like doors, and maybe sometimes some buttons, but I try to keep it to more superfluous things that I don't use regularly. And but I'm not doing that with the MD-11 at this time, so you won't see anything in here. So we're not going to touch this today, but just so you see it, it's here, it's available. The TCA Boeing Yoke from Thrustmaster is the primary flight controls that I use for the pitch axis and the roll axis, and then I've got a number of buttons on that. We are going to talk about that today. And then I'm using WinWing Stalker rudder pedals, Skywalker, not Stalker, WinWing Skywalker rudder pedals that I just got at the Expo. For my yaw axis and brakes. And there's not really buttons to map here. It actually lists a whole bunch of buttons. Methinks the control board they have inside has a bunch of options for stuff that you could tack on, I guess. Probably to give WinWing options for doing things. But there's no actual buttons on the thing, so I don't know what these correspond to. But these are the brake axes and then the rudder axes. We'll talk about those too. We're going to start with the Bravo, though. So those are the controls I'm using. If you're unfamiliar with SPAD, you can complete profiles for every aircraft that you want and then assign them in the flight sim so it will automatically pull them up. For instance, I have this MD-80 profile. It is shared, it is published in SPAD, so you can actually go and grab this profile if you want. And I don't think I can see my own here. Maybe I can. Let me see, search 11475. Oh, there we go. Aha! So yes, it is 11475, and there it goes. MD-11 Mustafa, boom, right there. So anyway, that's how you can find other people's profiles and just import stuff in if you want. Again, unless you're using the exact same hardware, you're going to have to do some tricky editing anyway. So this is where we're going to mainly hanging out, though, is the equipment right here, and then the controls, they call it, and then this plus sign, which is extra. And this is really important to doing your own mapping. This allows you to pull up all of the LVARs and events and stuff and see them in real time and understand what the aircraft is using, and I'll explain how we do this. So I'm going to first go through and, well, actually, let me do this real quick. So when you see this, you see nothing here. It's data monitor. I've never really gotten the event monitor to work very well. So I just use data monitor, and if you go to add LVAR, it's going to jump up all of these things. You see the actual, if you click last change and hit it again, you're actually going to see it's populating this right now as we speak. So we want to wait till it's done populating, but it's pulling in tons of variables. And again, these are all variables that you can have access to manipulating in SPAD. Microsoft sees but a fraction of these as far as their controls go. So you can't control anything that they haven't specifically assigned. And then what it does is in last change, I can go into the aircraft. So I'm going to move this off to the side for a second just to demonstrate this. And I'm going to, let's say I want to know what this FMS speed button does. You know, what controls this? How do I map this? So I'm just going to click it a number of times. And then if I go back to the monitor and I hit last change twice, first of all, I have a whole bunch of this nonsense. Now this is from Parallel 42. If you're using their immersion package, you've got all this stuff, and because it's constantly changing, this is a lot of noise that you want to get rid of. So this over here, right here, this little, I don't know what to call this, it's like a page thing. If you click this, it mutes that channel until you reload the LVARs. So I don't need to worry about any of the Parallel 42 immersion stuff. I'm just going to mute them out of the way. Boom, done. And then EFB actual, takeoff weight, it's menacing with that all the time. But AI pitch ring, immersion. I really should have done this before I pushed the button. So I'm actually going to do it again. Immersion. These are things that are still making noise. You can tell when the values are changing that it's something that is noisy, and you can kind of ignore it. And then I would ignore more immersion stuff here just to get it out of the list. And all right, so let's go back. Let's do this again. So FMS speed button, I'm going to push that a few times, and we're going to do last change. There we go. MD-11 FMS speed button right there, and the value is currently 0 because I'm not pushing it. But if I was to push that right now, then you'd see that change to a 1 and then back. And so I know that that's manipulating it. Now with the MD-11 specifically, most of the things that are or how you want to trigger things are actually through this see event. And this can be obnoxious because it's not going to show you the event number for any length of time. You're going to have to like rapid fire click it and watch it like appear and disappear. And that's how I found some of this stuff. So a lot of these you'll find out on Elevars are just the actual physical button moving. It's not actually triggering the event. And so you oftentimes have to find what actually triggers the event in SPAD, not just the button moving. And so it takes a little bit of sleuthing. I've done all that for you in this aircraft, so you don't need to try and track it down. And I'm going to explain how that works now as we go through. So what we're going to do is we're going to look through all the buttons and switches, and I'm going to flash a little in the, I think in the lower right-hand corner. I'm recording this, and I'm going to edit this in post. So in the lower right-hand corner, you're going to see a picture of my Bravo, and I'm going to have little arrows pointing to what these buttons are actually doing and what they are, and then you can see how they manipulate in the cockpit. So I hope this is going to make sense. This is the first real kind of in-depth SPAD I've done on a aircraft, so I hope this works well. So let's just try this out and see. So here we go. So first of all, let's do with the easy stuff, or the easier stuff, I guess, is the axes. And that's going to be your bread and butter for the Bravo throttle. So let me click over here and get us to a point where I can actually see what we're dealing with. This is what we're going to be messing with down here. And so I have my spoilers. First of all, I'm just going to show you how they react. I'm pulling them in my Bravo. So I'm going to pull the spoiler handle down just a little bit, and it arms the spoilers. Then I'm going to continue pulling it down. It's going to retract the arm, and now it's going to go into a mode where it's selecting the 3 ranges. This is not a fluid spoiler handle. You'll notice there are detents here. Boom, boom, boom. So I have 1/3 spoilers, 2/3 spoilers, full air spoilers. Now I can move the Bravo has a full range axis, and then it has a detent down at the very bottom. And I've set the detent. Now this will only work on the ground anyway, but when I go into that detent, it pulls the ground spoiler out, which is the full landing spoilers that come out when you arm the spoilers once the weight on wheels switch activates. So let's talk about how I did all of that, because that's the most complicated device as far as an axes go on this aircraft, is to make that work. So let's look at that in detail now. So we're going to go and click on the spoilers, and you can see this is how I'm making this happen. So if nothing else, you can take a picture, you can pause the screen right here and see how I did it. But this is what you're going to want to do. So I've got 3 scripted events in here, and I have an axis change. So the first thing I want to draw your attention to is this axis change. Now what I did is I have this set as a range. So I've got the range definition turned on from and to. I've got it rescaling for the actual device to make sure, because the device is seen as minus 16,383 to 16,383. And what I want to do is tell it that within that full range of the spoiler, I only want it going from here to here in the sim. That's what that's telling it. So that when I pull the spoiler handle, I'm going through the entire range of the spoiler handle axis. You see it right there from 401 to 1023. That's the entire range of the axis. But I only want the spoiler to actually mess with it starting with about 401, right about there. That's where it starts to take over and starts to do its thing, which is kind of cool. So I can tell it to do that. Everything before that, it sees me moving it, but it's not going to do anything, so I can use that to arm the spoilers. Okay, so that's the first thing. We got the range. We obviously want the use axis value, use the raw rescaled value, and in this case, we have to invert the axis. A lot of things you'll find that you'll have set up perfectly, and then you get in the sim and it does the exact opposite of what you told it to do. You just want to hit that invert axis. Not always necessary, but sometimes it is. All right, so I'm going to cancel there. We're going to go back out of this. And so now we want to see how we did the spoiler arm. So the spoiler's arm is these scripted events here. And so I have to look at them and see exactly what is doing what. So there's the first one. So this is the resting event. They're not in order. So scripted event, let's look at this. So send spoiler's arm off event and send spoiler disarm to 1. So there's a generic spoiler arm event in Microsoft Flight Simulator that's easy to use. And then there's a specific disarm event that I want to set to 1 because I'll use that event manager to find out what it was doing. And I want those to both to take effect, but only under this condition. And the condition is this. When this axis, I have to look up the joystick axis, when the y-axis, which is what the spoiler axis is in the Bravo for this guy right here, when that equals 100, so 100% full forward, that's when this goes. So only when it reaches 100 do these events activate. That's a conditional statement. You don't have to have a condition here, but it gives you some options. These are things that you can't do in Microsoft Flight Simulator. I can't tell it, oh, when it reaches this, do this, but when it's like this, do this. You can't get that special. And you can make these condition bindings an and or an or. You can have them repeat. You can do all kinds of fun things in a script. So that's how we did that. From there, the next thing to do, you just saw that little guy pop up there, and it just does it for a moment, is when I pull the spoiler handle back out of that 100 a little bit, we go into scripted event number 2. And that is telling it anywhere between, the conditional statement is if the axis is between 95% and 80% in the axis, these are the things you're going to do. You're going to send spoiler set event. You're going to delay the execution. This is a pause for 100 milliseconds, so just a moment. And this allows the SPAD program to kind of like breathe and not miss anything. A lot of times if you leave this out, it'll just run roughshod over the rest of this and you won't get these. So if you find you're setting multiple things in and it's not getting them all, put little delays in there. You can do add action. It's actually called pause delay right there, and it'll default to 100 milliseconds. That's usually what you want to do. So FYI, we're going to use that a few times, you'll see. So delay the execution, and then send spoiler's arm on event right there. That's the Microsoft one. And send spoiler disarm to 0. So this is specific to the MD-11. This is Microsoft generic and the spoiler set event. So all these things I discovered I needed to have activate in order for this to work correctly. And I think this one is what allows you to get the sound with it, the clunk, because a lot of times some of this stuff will send and not generate the sound if you don't do certain things. So anyway, that's what I have set there for that. And then finally, if we move beyond that, boom, now we've gotten to here. And so what we needed to tell it was to say, once we get beyond 80 and down as low as 75, I want you to disarm the spoiler, send the spoiler's arm off of him. And so we need to re-disarm that so we can use the spoilers in their normal axis. So the long and short of it is, unfortunately, in the real aircraft, you wouldn't have to arm the spoilers and disarm them to move them. But because there's no way to really get beyond that, that's how I have to do it, because I don't have a button for spoiler's arm. If I did that, I could get away with that. But to have it all in the same axis, it's really nice. So in other words, if I'm just going to move the spoilers, I'm just going to pull them to their full extension real fast, and you're going to see what happens. So you see how it kind of lifted up for a moment? It was really fast. But it doesn't seem immersion braking unless you go really slow. Because then it goes up, down, and then and then down the thing. So it's not a big deal. All right, so that gets us to the full thing, and then it just uses the logic. Microsoft Flight Simulator's logic is able to, because the way TFDi programmed it, is able to use just the generic spoilers axis to go into those detents. It won't have to do, you don't have to set anything fancy. It just knows. So that's nice that they programmed it that way. If they didn't do that, we'd have to do some more magic. So that's all we have to do there. Now, for the ground spoilers, if I push this thing down into its detent, you see it just lit up number 24 there. That's that detent. And so button pressed, spoilers on, button released, spoilers off. That's all that it is. It's real simple. So that's all we're doing to make that happen. And then obviously when it goes back away, that goes away. So that's the spoiler. That's the most complicated one of this whole bunch, okay? So never fear. I'm going to move over to the flaps real quick because we're going to explain the throttles in a second. The flaps are very simple by comparison. First of all, we're not using the detent, the flap detent. The flap detent is this guy right here. There's no reason for it. We don't need the flap detent, so we're not even worrying about it. I'm going to pull it back here real fast. And it's a, we have an axis change right here, flap auto detent, because that's a, again, the sim talks to the plane specific and kind of figures out where those detent spots are. so it doesn't just drive through the entire range and is smooth, but it actually, as you move the axis through its range, it finds those automatic detents. If you are using something like one of those adapters for your Bravo, where you have little actual detents on the Bravo, you're probably going to have to do that differently and make sure those line up correctly. Although they may line up correctly by default, but if they don't, you're going to have to go in and do stuff like I did with the spoiler axis. But otherwise, scripted event, send flaps up event is the scripted event for this, and that happens if the axis equals 0. So I just wanted to make sure that use the auto detent, yes, but I want to make sure that when I put that flap handle full up, it actually does send the flaps up event total. Because sometimes if you go too fast, it can get stuck and it'll stick at the flap 0 spoilers extended spot. And so that kind of helps prevent that from happening. Okay, so flaps, really easy. All right, moving on to the throttles. The throttles are all identical, except they're throttle axis 1, 2, and 3. Now I have mine in the throttle actually 2, 3, 4 position, mainly because I'm often flying 2-engine aircraft, and so it's a lot easier just to add the third throttle on the end instead of having to shift everything over and change my throttles that way. So in the event of using a 3-engine aircraft, I typically do it this way. So throttle 1 and 2 are the same as all the other planes, and I'm just adding throttle number 3 for the third engine. So let's look at how we did this. First of all, axis change. This is, let's see, which one is which here? I gotta see which one's doing.
Stabilizer. Full lap.
Okay, I think that is, are we not using, I may have something in here that I'm not even using. Let's see, edit this. This is control axis. Dun, 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 dun.
Full lap.
Yeah, that's okay. Throttle axis set. And what is this guy doing? Throttle without reverser.
Stabilizer.
I don't think, one of these guys isn't doing his job. Let's find out which one it is. Okay, that works. Let's enable that and disable this one. And they're both working. I'm not sure why I have 2 in there. I think because it doesn't seem to be necessary. That's an oversight on my part. I'm not sure what's going on there. Axis range, they're all the same. Yeah, there's no difference. They're the same thing. There's just 2 different ways of accomplishing the same thing, so they're just doubling each other. So I really can just take one of those out, and I probably will, but I'm not going to do it now. Yeah, so it's basically you're just using the default range. I'm using it throttle without reverser because I have my reversers mapped differently. It's not on the axis. So if you want to use your actual axis for reverse, and what that means is, let me give you an example here. So here's the range of the throttle. So, whoops, helps if I pick the right throttle. What is this, number 3? Yeah, there we go. Oh, this will be convenient because this one doesn't have the takeoff warning on it. What it means is if you want to use this as a reverser, when you get to say, let's say 300 right here on the axis, at that point that would be idle. And then anything below that is reverse. But without a specific stop in your throttle, you're going to end up finding yourself going into reverse all the time accidentally, and that's dangerous. So I don't want to do that. I don't do that at all. So I've got those detents on the back of each throttle for reverse, and then we have the reverser switches as well. Now they're just switches. The disadvantage of this setup on the Bravo is that they're just switches. They're on-offs. They're not axes. It'd be really cool if they were axes, but they're not. So we're going to kind of fake that they're axes. I'm going to show you how we do that. So we're going to look at the reversers right now. So I'm going to take number 3, and I'm going to drop it into its detent. This is not the reverser handle. This is the lower detent of the throttle. Boom, right there, 28. Now, what happened was we see reversers unlocked. It's not accelerating into reverse. You can see that is just up slightly. I'm going to put it back. There it goes. Boom. It just ever so slightly bumps it up one. It's basically putting it into idle reverse. It's unlocking the reverser. It's opening the clamshell back there, or whatever the split. So what we're doing is, I have this set. That was 28, I believe. Yeah. So basically all it is, it's a button press throttle decrease event one time. You just decrease once. It goes into the tiniest of reverse. And then the opposite of that, button released, is the throttle cut. So throttle idle. Okay? That's all we're doing there. Now, what I do is I put that into, so when I land, I push all my throttles down into their lower detent. It unlocks the reverse, goes into idle reverse. And then we pull up the reverse handle on number 3. That activates number 12. And that activates what is an obnoxious way to have to do this, but unfortunately that's the way I had to do it, is a whole bunch of throttle decrease events repeating themselves. And it's a specific number of times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 19, 20. 20 times is the appropriate number to get the reverse handle to pull all the way up. So when I pull that back down, it's going to put it back to idle reverse. You can see it reversing there. So we get the effect, it's really cool, of unlock the reverser, wait till it unlocks, and then pulls the reverser into full. And it doesn't just slam into full, it actually kind of pulls it back nice and smoothly. It's as close as you can get to a reverser axis without having a reverser axis. And I've done that to all 3 engines. So that's how I'm doing reverse on the MD-11. So it's pretty cool. It's obnoxious. You got to do it that way. And in the event, you just got to put them all in there, and it will just it'll do that many times. If you want to go even slower, you can put a pause in between each one of those, and it'll even more slowly. It'll be a little more staccato, to use a musical term, than smooth like you saw it on mine. But it works. So that's how you do that. Okay, so that is all the axes on the Bravo. So let's look now at the quadrant. By the way, when you're setting up your SPAD, I recommend that you do it with the engines running, because there are certain things, especially with regards to throttles and stuff, that you won't really be able to understand what's happening in the aircraft without the aircraft being running, and some of the buttons won't seem to work right. So put your aircraft up into ready to fly, and then do that. That's the best way to do it. And it has gotten dark on me, although it doesn't really matter. The cockpit's clear to see, so I don't really care. All right, so we're going to go up here to AP and switches. Now this is all the fun stuff on the Bravo. So let's talk first of all about the top level here. So this switch here is your encoder switch, and you have a couple predefined items on your Bravo. You have the IAS switch, indicated airspeed, course switch, heading switch, vertical speed switch, and alt switch. And what these are doing is it's determining what this encoder is going to encode. So when you're in IAS mode, then this one is going to change the speed indication. When you're on heading mode, that same encoder is going to change the heading indication. And when you're on alt mode, it's going to change the altitude, and it's going to cause Bitching Betty to yell at you. When it's on vertical speed mode, it's going to mess with the vertical speed, but because we're not flying and don't have a speed mode set, it's not going to show anything, but I can see that switch there moving, so I know it's working, so that's helpful. Okay, so that's what that is. So you don't have to touch anything on this one, but on this one, you have to tell it what each of these do at a clockwise and a counterclockwise turn. Now, to know which one's which, whoops, I'm going to do this first. Right here, you see button 17. Watch that change as I change this. That's 17, 18, oh, move my mouse. 18, 19, 20, 21. So it's 17 through 21, and so over here, you're looking for 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. And you're telling it for a clockwise turn, it's going to do this, and for a counterclockwise turn, it's going to do that. Now, here is where the MD-11 gets kind of annoyingly complicated. They use those LVAR C events as numbers to control so many things, not the actual LVAR buttons, because those are just the animations, and they won't actually do anything. If you trigger the C event, it will trigger the animation as part of it. But you got to know what the C event is. And so to do that, you got to really stare at that event monitor and find these out. I've done this for you. So again, here's where you want to take a picture or pause the screen and see what these are. So for button 17, which is the clockwise turn of the airspeed indicator, it's C event 86066. Its reciprocal is 86067. So 86066 goes clockwise up, and 86067 goes back down. It's just that simple. Really easy. And there's nothing else to it other than you're telling it you use the LVAR C event in a set condition and do that. And every time you spin that knob, it's going to hit that set again and it's going to bounce it up. All you got to do. Really simple once you know this. Now what I did, there is no same thing for heading. Heading is C event 86074 and 75. The vertical speed is 86086 and 86087, and the altitude is 86080 and 81. Okay. Now, the one I decided to take a little liberty with is the course indicator, because you'll notice on the MD-11 there is no course. So what do you use that for? Well, I set that to be the baro, because I figure why not? So if I set mine to course, now it's messing with the baro, and I can do the baro. So if you want to do that, you can. Obviously, you don't have to. You can do whatever you want. But so that one is 86059 and 86060 is the baro indicator. Okay, so that's what I did. All right, moving on. So that takes care of all of that. The heading switches, these ones took a little bit of fun. So first of all, I wanted to do it where all of the LEDs light up, not with the modes, because that's why we have an FMA. This tells us the modes. It's way too complicated. I tried looking to see if I could align the LEDs with when they're active. It wasn't happening. So, so I just made it so when the battery switch is on the aircraft, the LEDs turn on for all of the buttons that I'm using. The only button I'm not using, and you'll see is not lit up right now, is vertical speed, because there's no vertical speed mode. You activate vertical speed by activating the correct altitude mode and then just manipulating the vertical speed. It's kind of like the Mad Dog. Although there is a special vertical speed mode in the Mad Dog, but you can choose whether or not you want to use it or not. Anyway, so that's what these are. So change LED is set to each one of these buttons that I'm using is to look at the overhead electric battery off light. When it equals 1, then the LED is off, because 1 means the battery is off, because battery off equals 1. 1 in binary is on, so off is on, which is kind of counterintuitive. But off is activated, then the LEDs are off. When the plane battery goes on, then the batteries trigger. And so what it's telling me right now is it does not meet that condition, so the LEDs are on. If I go to the LED on one, you'll see it says it does meet this condition right now, because battery off equals 0, then we turn the battery LED on, or the event LED on, okay? So those are all the same on all of those. I've got them all set the same, and the same thing on the autopilot switch button over there. Okay, so how do we do this for heading? Because again, this aircraft is kind of goofy with the way it works. It doesn't have just individual heading buttons. It has several things. So let's look at the heading, for example. So heading is a push-pull switch. Pushing the switch toward you, pushing the switch away from you, sets the aircraft heading mode into whatever heading the aircraft is currently in. So let me demonstrate that. So right now, I'm going to put the aircraft heading, that's not heading, there we go. I'm going to put the aircraft heading into something like that, 86. But you can see we're facing 38 right now. If I push, which is the equivalent of the up arrow here, boom, it just reset the heading to that. If I want to arm heading mode to be something, so I'm going to move it again out of the way, I have to pull it toward me, because pulling it toward me puts me in control. Boom, like that. Now, it's not really going to do anything because we're actually sitting here in like takeoff mode. Let me see if I reset the flight directors, if I can bring it back. No, it thinks we're on the ground. So I wonder if I do... No. just trying a few things. See if I got it to do it somehow earlier, and I don't know how I did it, so it doesn't matter. What that's doing is that would arm, if we weren't on the ground waiting for takeoff, it would set that to heading and that number by pulling that toward me. So what do I want this heading button to do? Do I want it to do one command? Do I want it to do the other command? Do I want to somehow do both commands? Well, I can in SPAD. So heading button, what I have decided to do is if I just press it quickly, I want it to just set my heading to like a traditional heading button would. So watch this. Watch the button there toggle as I click the heading button. See how it pulls it out toward me? Boom, boom. Now if I hold the heading button, it pushes it and resets. And then clicking it again will do it back to me. So a long hold will set is the equivalent of a push. And I figured that was simpler to figure out because if you're going to long hold, you're definitely pushing. And if you quick push, then it's a pull condition. So here's what we did. So button pressed for a longer time, greater than 1 second, is going to set the event 86078, wait 100 milliseconds, and then set 86079. This is important because if I don't have that 79 set in there, it's going to push that in and stay in and not come back out. I want it to push and back out, just like it does, just like you would, see how it goes in and comes back out? That's what I want it to do. And how it pulls and comes back in, that's what I want it to do. So you're going to find you need all of these like delays and then the reset condition. So what you'll find here is to do that, 78 is the push in and 79 is the release. On the shorthand one, 76 is the pull out and 77 is the release. And so you want both those in. If you don't put that delay in there, it's going to skip over the next one. It's still going to stay stuck in. So, or it'll just never go in at all. It'll just do the last command because it's going to go so quick. So you want that delay in there. So that's what I've done for the heading. So those are the events for the heading. For the nav button was a little simpler, kind of, because it's just a one button thing. It's nav. However, I don't have something for the speed because there's actually 3 options for speed. We have the push, the pull, and FMS speed, which is goofy. So again, pushing sets my current speed or as low as it'll go, which is 100. So I'm on the ground stationary. It's not going to set 0. It's going to set 100. If I do this and I click that out, now it's going to arm 131 because that's pulling it toward me. If I want the FMS to command the speed, I have to click that. And it's going to arm the FMS speed, which it's not going to do right now again because we're on the ground. It's not doing anything. The FMS isn't even programmed, so it's not really going to do anything. But I've got 3 options. So what I decided to do is for the nav button, I made the quick click, the standard nav button, which is this guy right here, 8690 and 86091 for the nav to click in and back out. So it says nav arm there. And if I reset the flight director, now if I hit my nav button, there you go, it just armed it when I hit it. So, and to unarm it, you gotta clear it. So, so that's what I decided to do there. And then I decided to make nav the long press to actually arm FMS speed, since it's right here. So these 2 buttons are kind of linked to each other in my mind. Again, you don't have to do that, but for the longer time press for the FMS speed is 88 and 89. They're all 86 zeros for these events. Not all events are 86 0, by the way, so just don't get used to that number too much. All right, approach. This one's simple. This is this button right here, and it's set to 8609293 and the LED. That's all it does. One button, one thing. Reverse. This one, what did I set this to? Oh, that's prof. Okay. So yeah, so again, I have the same problem with the altitude. I've got a push-pull, and I've got a altitude profile button here. And so reverse, right next to the altitude button, is the prof button, the profile button. So that's 96 and 97. Altitude, we've got 2 settings. We got a push and a pull. So we have a push short and a push long. Again, push short is to pull it toward me. Push long is to push it toward the aircraft. And again, we'll set whatever altitude I'm currently at to do altitude hold. And then Betty will yell at me. So 84, 85 is the long time push. That's the push. And 82, 83 is the short pull toward me. and the LEDs. Vertical speed, like I said, I'm not using because there's really no point for it. So it's an extra button if I need something for an extra button at some point, but I'm not using anything at this point. And then IAS, which is the airspeed. Again, we've got the long time, which is the push. So that's 070 and 071. And then the pull is 068, 069, right there to do that. Okay? Autopilot button, which is this guy right here, the auto flight. I have it set to do a short time, which is 94.95, which is just pushing this button, the auto flight button. However, if I hold it, it's going to activate the auto flight system override off switches, and it will toggle them. So I'm going to hold the auto flight button right now. See how it killed both those? And I'm going to hold it again, and it's going to put them back. This is not the preferred way to disconnect your autopilot, by the way. The preferred way is on the Yoke, and I have buttons set up for that. We're going to get to that when I talk about the Yoke. But sometimes you might want to do that, and if you want to just reach over and have that, I thought it was kind of a cool option. It's also autopilot related, so might as well. So there you go. And then I've got the LEDs for the autopilot light. All right, coming down. I'm going to deal with... I'm going to go over here first. So this I'm not using for flaps. This is a fun toggle button that you can use if you have a traditional, like I'm using the flap axis for flaps. So I'm not using this. You could toggle this down for flaps too if you wanted, but I'm not doing that. So I'm using this because you know what's really kind of a pain to get to in this aircraft? The auto brake, because it's right behind the stupid spoiler handle. Even when it's armed in the up position, you still can't click it because it clicks the spoiler. So what I did is I set that toggle, so if I toggle it up, it goes through the various modes of the auto brake. And if I toggle it down, it goes back through the various modes of the auto brake. And what's super convenient about the MD-11 is it tells you right here what mode you're in. So watch the blue. Auto brake min, auto brake medium, auto brake max, auto brake takeoff, auto brakes off. So if you can't see it, and let's say I go, I want to set auto brakes takeoff. Did I hit the auto brakes? Oh yeah, it's right there. If I'm coming into land and I'm not sure if I hit the auto brakes for medium like I want, oh, auto brake medium, it's right there, I can know. And then I can disarm them really easy by just doing that. So it makes it for a really easy, in the real airplane, you could just reach over and do it. But you can't do that unless you have a thing. So I found that toggle to be perfect for that. So I'm not using it for flaps, I'm actually using it to toggle my auto brakes. All right, all of these switches over here. These, for the last 3 or the last 4 or the last 2, depending on what aircraft I'm flying, are always my engine fuel cutoff switches. And so that's what they are here. So the last 3 in this case. And again, throttle 1 fuel switch to 1 or 0, throttle center fuel switch 1 and 0, and throttle R fuel switch to 1 and 0. That's the command for those. Real simple. You just got to go find the LVARs for them. Set 1. 1 equals usually on. Yeah, switched on 1, switched off 0. Very simple. For these guys over here, I decided, you know what, I've got 4 of these. So what do I do? Well, I've got 2 landing light switches, a taxi light switch. So I'll use these first ones in the same order. So I'm using these guys right here. And so if I open this back up, you're going to see here, this is my landing light switch and off. It's a 3-position switch, but the first position is just the retract or not retract. So what I've got it set up to do, this is kind of cool, guys. This is the kind of cool stuff you can do in SPAD. You can't do in Microsoft Flight Simulator. What I did is I told it, hey, I want you to switch this thing on, but I don't want to risk it toggling so the switch gets out of position. Because what could happen is I could, let's say I toggle the landing lights on, and it's going to take a second because they have to unretract here, they have to extend. Now what happens if I come up here and I flip that switch off in the sim, but I didn't do it here on the panel? Now my switch is still in the up position on the panel, but the switch is off here, they're opposite. So I don't want it to do, whereas if I hit the switch again to off, it's going to turn it back on, and you notice it does not. So what I did is I told it, hey, switch this on, but you're only going to do this action, and you're going to do it twice. You're going to do 5/8 pause 5-8, because each one of those is the command to step up, step forward in the thing. So the first 5-8 commands it to extend, and then the second 5-8 commands it to on. But I said, I want you to look at the overhead landing lights left switch. If it equals 2, which is on, you can do this. If it equals anything else, you're not going to do jack. And the same thing on the other side, on the off side. If it equals 0, you can turn it on now, or switch off when it's 0. But if it doesn't equal that, then you're not going to do jack. So what that does is it protects that switch, and it also, because it's sending both commands, even if I'm in the extended position and I hit on, it's gonna send the command twice, but it doesn't have anywhere to go after the first one, so it's just gonna turn it all the way on. So I can be in off, or I can be basically in off or extend, and the on button will turn it on every time. I can be in on or extend, and the off button will turn it off every time. So that's, again, the magic of SPAD and conditions and all that stuff. So the landing light switches, you can see, are 5-7, 5-8 are the two commands you need. 90-257, 90-258, and that's how I did that. Same thing for the right switch. It's 9259 and 9260. Same condition, but this time it's looking for the right switch. And then the other one, I did the same thing with the taxi switch, 61 and 62, 9262 and 9261. And for whatever reason, though, and I think I have to reload the plane. Now it's working. It wasn't working a little bit ago. It wasn't coming on. The switch was moving, but the light actually wasn't coming on. So let me just make sure so it's working now. I don't know why that wasn't working before. It was really weird. So I did that. Then I've got one last switch over here, and I figured, you know what can I use that for? I know what I can use it for. The dome light. So that's my dome light. Boom, boom. Now, it's easy enough in this aircraft to hit right there, but I just thought, hey, why not? And again, the way I've got it programmed is if I turn the dome light on here and I hit my dome light on switch, it doesn't turn it off. It doesn't reverse the setting until I turn the switch off. So it's really nice by doing that, again, using those conditional statements, looking for the dome light being in a 0 state for doing this, and for the dome light being in a 1 state for doing this. That's how we do that in SPAD. All right. Finally, almost finally, we have the lights for the gear. And so what I did is I mapped those to, you've got the change LED to green, red, and off. And on these, it's kind of interesting because there's no off position for them. The lights, the way the MD-11 did this is they made it so this light is 1 for green and 0 for not green, and 1 for red and 0 for not red. So what do we do? Well, off means red and green are both 0. So again, in the conditional statements, we just had to tell it to do that. So for off, both green and red get 0, and that gets us an off indication. For the green, I just wanted to make sure everything was above board, so I made sure green was 1, red was 0, that gives me green, and green was 0 and red was 1 equals red, and then so on and so forth. And I had to do that for each one of those. And the way they're labeled there, the nose one is called MD-11 MIP nose green, and then these guys are MIP left green and MIP right green. So that's how you find those. The landing gear, I'm just using the standard Microsoft gear up and gear down event. So that's really easy. Gear down equals gear down event. Gear up equals gear up event. That's simple. No need to be more complicated than that. And that is how I have my Bravo set up. I don't think there was anything else. I'm not using the enunciators in the Bravo, so I didn't map those. So we don't even have to worry about them. Oh, one last thing. Almost forgot. There is a tricky little cheeky switch. Now on the MD-11, on almost all commercial jetliners, you have a toga switch, which stands for takeoff, go around. Doesn't stand for a toga party, but it's in the MD-11. You have a go around button that you have to be able to push only for go around. You don't use it for takeoff because you use the auto flight button by pushing it once. It arms half the thing, and then when you get 70% thrust, it automatically engages the auto throttles. So how do you hit the go-round button? Well, the go-round button is right here. It's this guy. And that's what you do when you're doing a missed approach. But that can be really hard to get to. It's easy when the thrust is at idle, but if your thrust is up here, that's not an easy button to hit. So what TFDi did is they made it a screw right there. That guy is your takeoff or your go-round button. However, if you have a Bravo, you have that little red button on throttle number 1 that is your go-round button, and I wanted to map that. So I did. So if I click that, and that's 30. So I've got it, it's actually not this auto throttle go-round event. Yeah, this guy's not anything. This we can disable. Whoops, I mean delete. This shouldn't be here. Delete event. It's just this. Button pressed. And so what it is, there was a series of things that had to all happen. So it's the LVAR Md-11 throttle GA button to 1, then the event 77852 wait, and then the button. And I just now realizing, why is this moving? Oh, just now I'm realizing I bet I did this slightly wrong. I'm gonna try something here real quick with all of you here watching. We're going to do this. Okay, so there's the C event. Unfortunately, I can't do this on the same screen because it's going to take over, so you're not going to be able to see it. I'm just going to span this real quick. 818. No, 5. It's 1 and 2, whatever that is. So, what did I have this? 7852. So it's 7851. So actually, what I don't need to do, I think I did this wrong. So yeah, I'm gonna change this because I know exactly what I need to do. So 77852. We're gonna add action. C event 77851, and I'm gonna kill these. Delete and delete. Those are not necessary. That's all we need. So now, when I hit that button, that should activate. Yep. Oh, it didn't pull it back out though. It's supposed to pull it back out. So okay, I clicked the button wrong. I thought I saw it as 5.2. I must not have. Stand by. Stand by. 5.2, 5. It is 5.1. 7.8. 7.7.8.5.1. How is that not working? 7.7.8.5.1. 7.7.8.5.2. That's the one time that doesn't seem to work. I wonder if I've got it. Is it reversed? It's reversed. Oh, that's what it is. 5.1, 5.2. How much you want to bet? So I just reversed them. 5.1, 5, then 5.2. Haha! There it is. So there we go. See it in real time. So there you go. So now it'll activate and it'll pop back out, and the event is the way you want to run it. So there we go. That did the trick. All right, cool. All right, so that's how I mapped that guy, number 30 there for the for that. All right, moving on to the let's go look at the WinWings real fast, just because this will go quickly. We have our rudder axis, our right toe brake. It's just an axis change, and you just do those custom axis or standard axis event as a right toe brake right there. So it's easy to pull up, and there's not really anything you need to do. Just define the range. So if you don't want the brake to have to go all the way to the floor, you can actually specify by hitting set here, by pushing on the brake when you want it to activate. So this is the right one. Let's see. So this guy. So if I wanted that's full extension on the brake. If I wanted to have the brake go to full extension, like right there, I could then hit set on these guys, and it would only go. It would top the axis out. It would alter the axis to stop there. I actually did that with my the actual rudder axis, because my rudders, the way I've got them set so they don't move, is they actually hit the back of the desk right there. You can actually see it right there. They're only going that far. So I went onto the rudder side and I told it, hey, 54.283 is the max extension. So I said full right is like in that vicinity, so it's pretty close. So it actually allows me to get full rudder extension without having to having to have the rudders in their full movement. Because these WinWings actually have such a broad range of movement, I don't need that broad for the rudders anyway. So So that's fine. So I just edited that. But again, standard rudder axis for that one as well. So these ones are all using standard axes. Really simple. And then let's look at the Boeing yoke. So this one has some fun. I don't use this. These ones are the weird little hat switch. I get super interference with these, so these don't get used at all because they cause problems. So I don't touch those. This guy. What is, oh, these two guys are the throttles down below that I don't use because they're kind of pointless. So the only axes I'm using on the yoke is the x-axis, which is the roll, and the y-axis, which is the elevator to pitch axis. But you see how it's causing all kinds of weird interference over here? It's actually causing interference in the x-axis too. I really would love to figure out how to fix that because that drives me nuts. But it's not as bad as this was, so I can just disable those. So anyway, if you know of any fixes for that, let me know. I would love to know. But the x-axis is the standard aileron x-axis. Not doing anything special with it. I just defined where it goes and put a null zone in there. The y-axis, same thing. It's the standard pitch axis. Again, I just did some custom definitions for the axes. So it would do things accordingly. Now, what you can also do, by the way, in SPAD is you can go to axis configuration. You can configure a response curve either for the device as a whole or specifically for this profile. And so I've done that for this profile because the pitch axis right now in the MD-11 is a little touchy. So I wanted to smooth it out, but I wanted full deflection if I went to the extremes. So I have it shallow until it gets to here, and then it really goes nuts. So I can get full deflection if I need it. I'm never pulling it back that far, so it's not really an issue, but I wanted to be able to test my elevators and make sure they go to full deflection. So you can do that and make a special axis just for the thing. I would always recommend doing it per profile, not per device. That way, in case you don't want the same profile on a different airplane, you're not tied to that. So just my recommendation there. I am going to... Oh, I need to save that because I've made some changes. All right, so that's done. Let's see here. Let's look at the buttons then. So buttons on the yoke. This one is where it gets a little fancy. So I have the trigger button I use for the autopilot disconnect, and that's again a C event. So 94727 and 94728 is the press in release. So really simple. Autopilot disconnect. You actually see it right there going when I do that. The button 12, which is the other trigger button on the other side, I use for the auto throttle disconnect, which is that guy right there. Boom. And I put them both in my yoke because I don't have an auto throttle disconnect button on the actual Bravo. I wish they did have a side button on number 1, but I like to use the red button. It's more in a position for go around, not for disconnect. So I use the other trigger on the yoke for my disconnect. That's 77844. 77845 is the release of it. Okay. Let's see. For the elevator trim, that's 3 and 5 and 4 and 6. And that's because 3, 4, there's 2 buttons on the Alpha. I'm sorry, on the on the Boeing yoke, and they're separately mapped. So I have them both set. So, but essentially the 3 and 4 are the trim up, trim down, and then 5 and 6 is a duplicate of that because it's the second switch. So, but yeah, like I said, I got to refine that a little bit better. So there we go. The hat switch is just the look around. That's camera controlled. That's through Microsoft. That's not done through SPAD, but you see it moving there. And then on the other side of the yoke, we have the I already showed you the trigger switch for the autopilot disconnect. I'm not using this one, number 11, which is the other side of this. The right side, the left side button, which is number 2, is not using on here because this is my push to talk for VATSIM. So this does not get mapped to anything. And on the other side, I'll use that for certain sync autopilot functions, like in the Fokker 28, and I think also in the BAE 146. But I don't really have a reason to have my right hand over here very often, so I don't have it mapped to anything. Let's see, and then finally, this video is getting a little bit long, but we're almost done, don't worry. We're going to come down to the aileron and rudder trim switches is what I use them for, the A-B switches. So the B is closer to my thumb, and that's the one you're going to use more often than not, which is the rudder trim. So the rudder trim, that's the rudder trim. It's an unfortunate thing too, because it's a button. It's that it has to hold. So you notice it does this when you click it individually, which is awkward. And so you have to hold it, and then it moves over. Unlike the, there we go. I've got a special button set up to kind of reset it as best I can. Unlike the aileron trim, which I use on this A thing here, which actually just moves over, and the aileron trim is slower to respond than the indicator, than the command for it. So just know that. So as you can see, I'm doing that, and as I bring it back, it's going to start moving to the other side. And so because of that, in order to get aileron trim to recenter on me, I mapped this button down here that when I hold it, it resets the two indicators. So the Xbox button on the TCA yoke is if I hold it down, it'll basically reset these guys to 0 as best it can, which is kind of cool. So let me show you how I have these set up. So this was 9 and 10 is the rudder trim, and so I've got it to where if you hold it for a short time, it's going to do this 69.850 and then 69.849 with a delay execution. But if you hold it, then it's going to do it's going to hold that too until you release it, and then it's going to give you the 68.49, which is the stop button. And same thing in 10, it's just the other way, so it's 48 instead of 50. 49 is still the dead stop position. And then for the aileron trim, that's 7 and 8. And so that is, for 7, it's a 853, 69.853, LVAR, click once, and then it's a repeating action if you hold it. And then the opposite is 52, 68.52, 69.852 with the repeating action. And then the Xbox button, which I believe is this guy here, yeah. So I've got these button helds, and there are a whole bunch of conditional statements to say if the aileron trim knob is greater than 25, which is the center position, then you're going to do this repeatedly until it doesn't equal greater to that. And likewise, you're going to do the same thing, but you're going to use the opposite command if it's less than 25. And then for this one is going to do something similar, but I have to make it do the clicky mode, otherwise it just runs roughshod over this, unfortunately, which is why I don't like this. The rudder trim indicator, if it's less than 25, then it's doing those commands, and if it's greater than 25, it's doing those commands, and so on and so forth. So that is how I've set that up, and the last thing I'm using on here that is the parking brake, and I actually use the gear handle on the Boeing yoke for the parking brake because I use the gear handle on the Bravo as the gear handle. So I've got it set to MD-11 throttle park lever to 1 when it's pressed, and released is 0. Real simple. And so that is, if you're not used to SPAD, that was a lot. I am sorry. But that is how I've set it up. Now, I also have snippets on there, which I just moved it out of the way. Why did I do that? I also have snippets assigned to these. So you can go and get those if you go to the, what is it? Event, online snippets, yeah. And I'll put links to, I'll put the numbers in the description down below, but they are 11472 for the rudder snippets, 11473 for the yoke snippets, and 11474 for the throttle snippets as a device. So if you don't have the entire profile, you can grab those individually, and then again do what you wish to make changes and edit and so forth. But this guy is your friend. This guy will help you a lot to try and track down these the various controls you need to do this. The first time, I don't want to dissuade anyone from SPAD. The first time you set up a SPAD profile from scratch, it will take you hours. But the more you use it, the more you get used to it, the faster it goes. And then once you have your aircraft set up, it is so amazing to fly with all the individual controls and being able to do all that. It's worth it. in my opinion. So I hope that was helpful and not just ridiculously fire hosey. If you're, I think that was probably very helpful if you're kind of like newer to SPAD, like when I was. I'm watching some of these videos and people are like, oh yeah, just do this and this. I'm like, how did you figure out how to do that? Like where would you? So thankfully I have a buddy of mine, Fresno Jay, who lives in town here. He came to the expo. He's been to the last few expos. And he is like the SPAD master. And so he spends hours and hours setting up his stuff. And so I was able to pick his brain a bit to kind of figure out what I needed to do. So hopefully, like I said, that was helpful. If you have questions, feel free to ask. Again, the Discord is going to be the best place to do it, but also the SPAD Discord is incredibly useful for bouncing off ideas and stuff. Once again, I am Mustafa. You can find me over on twitch.tv/Mustafa streaming about 3 days a week. Would love to see you over in the live streams. It's a lot of fun over there. You can then join the Discord. Like I said, the link in the description is down below. That's a much better place than asking questions in the YouTube channel. Especially if it's technical about the SPAD stuff. And then finally, if this was helpful, please do hit that like and subscribe button. It really does help grow the channel. I'm getting a lot of good reaction to the MD-11 series, and I have a ton of great reaction to the Masterclass series for the Mad Dog. If you have some genius ways about doing some other controls that you're a SPAD user and you're a SPAD guru, hit me up. Let me know, because I'm always looking for new ways to do stuff too. So believe me, I'm not the SPAD genius. I figured it out enough to work, and people were asking me, can I see what you do for SPAD? So I was like, oh, I guess I'll do a video. So there you go. So that's what this was. Again, hopefully it helped somebody, and hopefully it didn't dissuade anyone from SPAD, because it really is an amazing program. It's got a pretty steep learning curve though, unfortunately. So, all right, take care everyone. I will see you on the next one, and I think that concludes the MD-11 Advanced Tutorial Series. See ya.